In the name of the one holy and undivided Trinity. Amen. Please be seated. So exciting to have a baptism Sunday here in this, when we're nearing the end of our Easter, our resurrection journey, anticipating Pentecost. I'm delighted to welcome the Reverend Melissa Adzima to be here today. We will be baptizing little Arthur Thomas. And Artie's mom, Barbara, grew up with Melissa in Pennsylvania, and she has traveled here from Denver so that we can do this baptism together. And it does feel lovely, especially given the gospel we just heard, to have all of this Christian community gathered up under one roof on this celebration Sunday. So please welcome Melissa and rejoice with the Alfeos. We have in our culture a pretty common cultural story about self-sufficiency and a story about living in a meritocracy. We hear this cultural story about how any individual, if they are talented enough, if they are determined enough, if they work hard enough, they can succeed all by themselves. We even have a particular kind of Christian work ethic named after this principle. We hear this narrative from some of our political leaders. We hear this sometimes about students in school and about pedagogy. And we sometimes hear a narrative about a past that claims that most people used to be more like this, and more people should be like this now. Somehow this ethic has been failing. And we hear it used to contrast negatively with people who are needy, dependent, vulnerable. We hear disdain in the language of entitlements. Because self-reliant people don't need such a thing. We love a story about a genius alone in a garage, inventing something new that will make lots of money and revolutionize the industry. But here's a funny thing for us to think about while we're gathered under this roof in God's house, hearing our common stories. This way of speaking about people, this story about how people should be, is not the story that we hear in the scriptures. It's not the story that God offers us about who we are. God tells us something else about ourselves. God reminds us that we do stand in need of God and of each other. We are in many ways helpless, we're told, and we need other people to teach us and feed us and heal us and comfort us and mother us. And this is not just true of children, though the presence of children do remind us of our own need. And God tells us too that in our need we are subject to what surrounds us. We are influenced by our environment and our community. We hear today in the very first psalm that people who live in the environment of righteous people, they are like trees planted by streams of water. They bear fruit in due season, with leaves that do not wither. Everything they do shall prosper. It is not so with the wicked. They are like chaff which the wind blows away. God tells us that a tree planted by water grows differently than a tree planted where there is no water. And we know that just from our lives, from observation. On this Mother's Day, some of us know the great joy and steadiness and courage that comes from being profoundly loved by our mothers and protected by our mothers and accepted by our mothers. And others of us on this day bear pain. The pain of never being a mother when we so longed to. Or the pain of our mothers not being the water we so desperately needed. We know that just from being in the world, that children who experience early trauma struggle more than children raised out of trauma with love and affection. And this is how God made us, to be mutually interdependent, part of an ecology. God tells us that there is no shame in our need. God made us for this, to nourish each other. Do you remember that parable Jesus told about the farmer who scatters seeds and they land on different kinds of soil? So some of the seeds fall on a footpath and the birds eat them. Some fall on shallow soil and they grow too fast and they wilt. Here in the Pacific Northwest, some grow on soil choked by English ivy, or blackberries, or knotweed, my mortal enemy, and they never stood a chance. But the seeds that fell on fertile soil gave back 30, 60, 100-fold. It was not the strength or intelligence of the individual seed that was at issue. It was the environment that they landed in, their community. Each individual seed could be the most robust one on earth, but if it was not surrounded by fertile soil, it would never grow. We hear today that trees flourish when planted by streams of water. They bear fruit, their leaves don't wither, and that is what it is like to be in holy community, to be among the faithful and the just and the good, or at the very least, among a bunch of us who are fumbling in that general direction together. Today, we are planting Artie in Christian community. We are thanking God for this good, delightful, happy seed and his delicious baby chunk thighs. And we, the body, are promising to be fertile soil for him to grow in. We are promising to be the stream of water and wisdom for him. We are promising that we will be that nutrient-dense dirt full of love and kindness and attention and forgiveness. We are promising that we will support him as he unfolds and blossoms into the person God called him to be. We are promising him that we will help slake his thirst for knowledge when he begins to ask questions, when he begins to take the faith on for himself. This is a big day for Artie, yes. And for his parents, who take on the weight of these promises until he grows to understand them for himself. But it is also a big day for us, Christ Church, and for the Church Universal worldwide. Today, when Barbara and Nick take on these promises and Artie is welcomed with water and oil and fire, the church is changed forever. Permanently, it will include the shape of Arthur Thomas. His gifts, his joys, his sorrows, his new questions, they will become a part of us and a part of the Christian story that has been being written for thousands of years. He too will wonder what it means to walk in the way of Christ. God willing, for the next 100 years, as the world changes in ways we can't even begin to imagine. And we get care of him for a time. We get to feed and water him with the ancient stories, with showing him how we are Christ's hands and feet in the world, with celebrating his life milestones, and with breaking the bread and sharing the cup with him. And that is the simplest thing in the world, and also the most majestic. It is what God built us for. Interdependent, standing in need of God and one another, learning to trust. And for that, today we give thanks. We rejoice. And we get ready for the church that is about to be born in just about 10 minutes. Amen.